Maya Johnson stood outside Blake's Books, her heart racing with a mix of excitement and anxiety. The local bookstore, known for its eclectic collection and cozy reading corners, was her first choice for promoting her debut novel, Shadows of Silence. She took a deep breath, adjusting her glasses and smoothing down her dress as she stepped into the shop. The scent of aged paper and freshly brewed coffee enveloped her, bringing a momentary sense of comfort. As she entered, the sound of chatter and the rustling of pages filled the air. She scanned the room, spotting a few customers browsing the shelves. Maya's enthusiasm was palpable, but as she approached the checkout counter, it quickly waned. Ethan Blake, the bookstore's owner, leaned back in his chair with an air of arrogance that seemed to radiate throughout the small space. His arms were crossed, and he wore a smirk that suggested he was already judging her before she even spoke. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone dripping with indifference, barely looking up from the book he was reading. "Hi, I'm Maya Johnson," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I'm here to discuss my book, Shadows of Silence. I'd love to set up a reading event here." Ethan finally looked at her, his eyes narrowing slightly as he took in her appearance. "A book about racism, huh? Not exactly what we'd call marketable." He leaned back, his dismissive tone cutting through her confidence like a knife. Maya felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "I believe it's important to share these stories. They resonate with many people." "Sure, but this is Blake's Books, not a charity. If it doesn't sell, it doesn't sit on my shelves," he replied, a mocking smile playing on his lips. The indifference of his words sent a wave of disappointment crashing over her. But she wasn't ready to give up just yet. "Maybe I could do a small reading? Just to gauge interest," she suggested, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "You can read if you want, but don't expect much. Most people here are looking for something different." He gestured vaguely towards the customers, who seemed blissfully unaware of the exchange happening at the counter. Taking a deep breath, Maya stepped back, heart pounding. "I'll be in the corner then," she said quietly, trying to mask the hurt in her voice. With a fire ignited within her, she made her way to a small nook in the store, a cozy corner adorned with plush chairs and a few scattered cushions. As she settled in, a couple of patrons glanced her way, curiosity flickering in their eyes. Maya opened her book, her hands trembling as she prepared to read passages that meant so much to her. "Excuse me, everyone," she called out, her voice rising above the ambient noise of the bookstore. "I'm Maya, and I'd like to share a few excerpts from my novel, Shadows of Silence. It explores the harsh realities of racism and the stories that often go unheard." A few heads turned, and she began to read, pouring her heart into each word. The themes of struggle, resilience, and hope resonated with the small audience that began to gather. Maya could see a spark of interest igniting in their eyes, and she pressed on, fueled by their growing attention. As she finished a particularly poignant passage, she looked up to find a mixture of expressions, some nodding, others visibly moved. Just as hope bloomed in her chest, a familiar voice cut through the moment. "Wow, that was something," Ethan's voice rang out from behind the counter. "But I'm sure you'll find that few people care about your message." Maya felt her heart sink. The weight of his mockery wrapped around her like a heavy cloak. She forced a smile, trying to shake off the sting of his words as she packed her things. But she couldn't ignore the ache of disappointment that settled in her chest. "Thanks for listening," she said to the small crowd, who clapped politely, their faces a mix of encouragement and sympathy. Yet, as she exited the store, Maya couldn't shake the feeling of defeat. She paused on the sidewalk, feeling the cool breeze against her skin, and took a deep breath. "I'll show him," she whispered to herself, determination igniting a fire within her. "I'll prove that my story matters." With renewed resolve, Maya turned away from Blake's Books, ready to embark on a journey that would challenge not only her resilience, but also the very fabric of the world around her. Maya Johnson sat cross-legged on her living room floor, surrounded by a chaotic mix of notebooks, coffee cups, and her laptop, which glowed as if it were a beacon of hope. The sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow over her workspace. But the warmth did little to chase away the chill of disappointment that had settled in her chest. She had poured her heart into Shadows of Silence, and yet, just days after its release, she felt as if it had been cast aside like a forgotten toy. Her best friend, Tasha, burst through the door, her energy infectious. "Maya, you won't believe the amazing ideas I have for getting your book out there." Tasha's presence was like a shot of espresso, and Maya couldn't help but crack a smile despite her frustrations. "Hey, Tash," Maya replied, her voice laced with both gratitude and weariness. "I just don't know if it's worth it anymore. It feels like no one cares." "Of course they care. You just need to give them a reason to notice," Tasha insisted, plopping down beside her and grabbing a nearby notebook. "Let's brainstorm. What about social media? You've got a voice, and it deserves to be heard." Maya sighed but nodded. "I've been hesitant to promote myself online. I don't want to come off as desperate." "Desperate? No, girl. You're a talented author with a powerful message. There's nothing desperate about that." Tasha flipped open the notebook, her pen ready. "How about a hashtag campaign? Something catchy that encapsulates your book's themes? Hashtag Shadows of Silence? Or maybe hashtag Voices in the Dark?" Maya mused, her fingers tapping against her chin. "Perfect. Let's also think about a virtual reading session. You could engage with your audience directly, answer questions, and really connect with people," Tasha suggested, her enthusiasm growing with each word. The two friends spent the afternoon drafting a plan, their laughter echoing through the apartment. Tasha's unwavering support reignited a spark in Maya, and as they plotted their next steps, she felt a sense of determination wash over her. Days turned into weeks, and while sales remained sluggish, Maya and Tasha organized a community event at a local park. They adorned the space with colorful banners and set up chairs in a semicircle, ready for an audience. Maya stood at the front, her heart pounding in her chest, a mixture of nerves and excitement. As people began to gather, Maya's breath caught in her throat. They were strangers, yet they were there for her. Tasha stood beside her, beaming with pride. "Look at all these faces. They want to hear you, Maya." Taking a deep breath, Maya stepped forward. "Thank you all for coming today. I want to share not just my story, but the stories of many who've faced the shadows of silence." Her voice grew stronger as she spoke, the words flowing like a river, each one carrying her truth. As she read excerpts from her book, she could see the audience leaning in, their expressions shifting from curiosity to empathy. After the reading, an older woman raised her hand, her voice trembling slightly. "Your words resonate with me. I've faced my own battles with prejudice, and it's comforting to know I'm not alone." Maya felt a wave of warmth wash over her. "You are definitely not alone. Our experiences may differ, but our feelings of isolation bind us together." The conversation shifted, and soon, the park was alive with shared stories, laughter, and tears. Maya realized that the event was more than just a promotion for her book. It was a space for healing, for connection. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the gathering, Tasha leaned in and whispered, "This is just the beginning, Maya. You've sparked something incredible here. Word is going to spread." Maya smiled, her heart swelling with hope. "I can feel it. We're building a community, and that's what matters most." That night, as they packed up the leftover materials, Maya knew she had found her voice, not just as an author, but as a catalyst for change. The shadows of silence were beginning to lift, and with Tasha by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. Maya Johnson was seated at her small desk in the corner of her cozy apartment, surrounded by scattered notes and half-empty coffee cups, the glow of her laptop illuminating her determined face. As the days passed since her book launch, the buzz around Shadows of Silence had grown louder. Social media was ablaze with discussions about her work, and her phone buzzed incessantly with notifications. But there was one name that lingered in her mind: Ethan Blake. Across town, in the dimly lit back office of Blake's Books, Ethan was scrolling through his social media feed, his brow furrowed with annoyance. The commentary surrounding Maya's book had become impossible to ignore. Customers were posting reviews and photos, praising her storytelling and the raw honesty of her narrative. Shadows of Silence was not just a book, it had turned into a movement. "This is ridiculous," Ethan muttered under his breath, tossing his phone onto the desk. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the polished wood. "Why should I promote a book that goes against our store's image? It's just not marketable." His assistant, a young woman named Clara, peered over her glasses with a raised eyebrow. "Ethan, the sales are skyrocketing. People are talking about it everywhere," she replied cautiously, sensing the tension in the air. "You might want to reconsider your stance. It could benefit the store." Ethan scoffed, crossing his arms. "I refuse to carry a book that criticizes me and my customers. I won't give in to this trend of political correctness. My clientele comes here for escapism, not for a lecture on society's problems." Clara sighed, realizing that reasoning with him was futile. "But what if we miss out on potential sales? It could bring in a whole new audience." "Enough, Clara," he snapped, his voice laced with irritation. "We're not carrying it. End of discussion." Meanwhile, Maya was sitting in her living room, enveloped in excitement and anxiety. The local journalist, Sarah, had reached out to her for an interview. Maya could hardly contain her joy and nervousness. She had read Sarah's articles before, and they were always insightful and impactful. This was her chance to share her message on a wider platform. When the day of the interview arrived, Maya wore a vibrant dress that made her feel both confident and fierce. As she sat across from Sarah in a small cafe, she took a deep breath to steady her nerves. "Thank you for this opportunity, Sarah. I really appreciate you wanting to share my story," Maya said, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Sarah smiled warmly, her notepad poised and ready. "Of course, Maya. Your book has resonated with so many people. I'd love to hear more about your inspiration and the challenges you faced." Maya felt a wave of warmth wash over her. "Well, Shadows of Silence is deeply rooted in my own experiences and the experiences of those around me. It's about confronting the uncomfortable truths of racism and the silence that often surrounds it." She paused, her eyes sparkling with passion. "I want readers to feel empowered to speak out and share their own stories." As the interview unfolded, Maya shared her journey, the rejection she faced from Ethan, and how it fueled her determination. Sarah listened intently, jotting down notes as Maya's words flowed effortlessly, filled with emotion and resilience. After the interview, Sarah promised Maya that the piece would be published soon, and that it would highlight not only her triumphs but also the dismissive attitude of Blake's books. "I think it's important for people to see the contrast," Sarah said, her voice firm. "Your success speaks volumes, especially in light of how you were treated." Days later, Maya sat in her living room again, scrolling through her phone. The article had gone live, and the reaction was overwhelming. Comments flooded in, praising her courage and expressing outrage at Ethan's behavior. "This is the kind of voice we need," one reader wrote. "Support Maya and her message." As sales surged, Maya felt a tide of vindication wash over her. But with every high came a low. Ethan's bookstore, once a staple in the community, began to see the repercussions of his arrogance. Customers who had once frequented Blake's books were sharing their own stories of being dismissed or marginalized, creating a ripple effect that Ethan could no longer ignore. He paced back and forth in his office, his frustration palpable. "How could this happen?" he growled, slamming his fist on the desk. Clara, ever the peacemaker, attempted to intervene. "Ethan, you need to understand that the community is speaking out. This isn't just about a book. It's about how you treat people. Maybe it's time to reassess your approach." Ethan glared at her, the weight of his decisions closing in. "I won't apologize for my beliefs. I refuse to change for the sake of popularity." But as the weeks passed and sales for Shadows of Silence continued to climb, Ethan realized that his stubbornness might cost him everything. The bookstore that once stood as a symbol of his pride was now on shaky ground, threatened by the very resilience he had dismissed. Maya stood on the stage at the literary festival, her heart racing with a mix of excitement and nerves. The audience was a sea of faces, some familiar from her community event, others simply curious about the woman whose book had sparked nationwide conversations. She took a deep breath, grounding herself in the moment, and began to speak. "Thank you all for being here today," she started, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her stomach. I want to share my journey, not just as an author, but as a Black woman navigating a world that often tries to silence voices like mine. As she spoke, the crowd leaned in, captivated by her presence. The stories she shared were not just hers. They belonged to many who had felt the weight of prejudice and discrimination. Maya's words flowed like ink from a pen, painting vivid images of her experiences. The late nights spent writing, the rejections that felt like personal attacks, and the moment she decided to pour her soul into shadows of silence. She emphasized the importance of diverse voices in literature, urging the audience to seek out and support stories that challenge their perspectives. Literature is a mirror, she proclaimed, her eyes shining with passion. It reflects our society, our struggles, and our triumphs. But too often, that mirror is fogged by biases and preconceived notions. We need to clear it, to allow everyone to see themselves in the stories we tell. As she concluded her speech, the applause erupted like a wave, washing over her with warmth and validation. Maya felt a surge of confidence, knowing she had connected with those present. After stepping off the stage, her heart still raced, invigorated by the energy of the crowd. As she navigated through the festival, she was approached by a familiar face, Lila Monroe, a celebrated author renowned for her poignant narratives on social justice. "Maya," Lila exclaimed, her eyes gleaming with admiration. "Your speech was incredible. It resonated with me on so many levels. I've been following your journey, and I believe you have a unique voice that needs to be heard." Maya blushed, taken aback by Lila's praise. "Thank you so much. Your work has inspired me for years. I can't believe you're here, talking to me." Lila chuckled softly, brushing off Maya's compliments. "I see a lot of potential in you. I'd love to mentor you if you're interested. We need more voices like yours in the literary world." Maya's heart leaped at the opportunity. "I would be honored," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've always admired how you tackle complex issues with such grace." As they exchanged contact information, Maya felt a renewed sense of purpose. This could be the turning point she had desperately sought. With Lila's guidance, she could navigate the literary landscape and amplify her message even further. Meanwhile, back at Blake's Books, the atmosphere was far from celebratory. Ethan Blake, the bookstore owner who had once dismissed Maya's work, sat at his desk, surrounded by the remnants of what had once been a thriving business. The sales figures he had received that morning were disheartening. Customers were leaving negative reviews online, sharing their experiences of prejudice and insensitivity they had encountered at his store. "Ethan, we need to talk," his assistant Sarah said, entering the room with a concerned look. "The backlash is growing. People are sharing their stories about how they've been treated here. It's affecting our sales." Ethan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, irritation etched on his face. "It's just a few people trying to stir trouble. We're not going to change our policies because of a handful of complaints." "It's not just complaints, Ethan. It's a movement," Sarah insisted, her voice firm. "Maya's book has resonated with so many people. They're not just upset, they're taking a stand." Ethan scoffed, dismissing her concerns with a wave of his hand. "Let them talk. We'll ride this out. They'll forget about it soon enough." But as the days passed, the situation only worsened. Customers boycotted the store, and social media campaigns against Ethan's dismissive attitude gained traction. He felt the walls closing in, the weight of his arrogance pressing down on him. The store that had once felt like his kingdom now seemed more like a crumbling fortress. Back at the festival, Maya basked in the afterglow of her speech and the possibility of mentorship. She had turned her pain into power, and now, with the support of someone as esteemed as Lila Monroe, she felt unstoppable. Little did she know that the ripples of her success were making waves that would soon reach Ethan, shaking the very foundation of his business. Maya sat at her desk, the weight of her newfound fame pressing against her like a heavy cloak. The walls of her small apartment, adorned with photographs and memories of her journey, felt both comforting and stifling. She had received countless messages from readers expressing how Shadows of Silence had touched their hearts, igniting conversations that she had longed to hear. Yet, with every success came the incessant pressure to be a voice for her community, to articulate their struggles while remaining true to her artistic vision. As she typed away on her laptop, Maya's thoughts were interrupted by a text from Tasha. "Hey girl, I saw you trending again. We need to celebrate." "Party popper," Maya chuckled softly, a smile breaking through her furrowed brow. Tasha had always been her cheerleader, urging her to revel in the joy of her accomplishments. Maya responded, "Thanks, Tasha. Let's meet for coffee later." "Absolutely. But first, let's talk about that op-ed idea you had. You need to get it out there?" Tasha's enthusiasm was infectious, and Maya felt a flicker of excitement at the prospect of channeling her thoughts into words. Later that day, they met at their favorite cafe, a cozy spot filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the soft murmur of conversation. Tasha sipped her latte while Maya nursed a cappuccino, their conversation flowing effortlessly. "I can't believe Ethan is still trying to undermine you," Tasha said, her brow furrowed in frustration. "It's like he doesn't get how important your voice is in this conversation." Maya stirred her drink, her mind racing. "I know. It's hurtful. Here I am, trying to share stories that matter, and he just dismisses me. It's like he can't see past his own arrogance." There was a moment of silence as Tasha nodded, understanding the weight of Maya's words. "Listen, you can't let him get to you. You have a platform now, and people are listening. You should write that op-ed. Show them that your voice matters, that it's not just about selling books, but about changing lives," Tasha encouraged, her eyes sparkling with passion. Maya took a deep breath, the idea settling in her mind. The op-ed could be her way of addressing the systemic issues that plague the literary world. "You're right. I need to speak out to push back against this dismissive attitude. It's more than just me. It's about all the voices that have been silenced." The fire ignited within her, and as the two friends brainstormed, the words began to flow. Maya envisioned the piece as a call to action, a plea for the literary community to embrace diversity and representation. "I'll write about the struggles I faced, the long history of marginalized voices being ignored. But I want to emphasize hope, resilience," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. Tasha leaned in, her excitement palpable. "Yes, and highlight the importance of supporting authors from diverse backgrounds. We need to shift the narrative." With fresh determination, Maya returned home that evening. She opened her laptop, the screen illuminating her face as she began to type. Each stroke of the keyboard felt like a cathartic release as she poured her heart onto the page. The words flowed like a river, each sentence building upon the last, weaving together her experiences, the struggles of her community, and the urgent need for change. As she crafted her op-ed, the memory of Ethan's dismissive remarks surfaced. But instead of feeling crushed, Maya channeled that pain into her writing. "This isn't just about me," she reminded herself. "It's about every person who has felt the weight of invisibility." Days later, after countless revisions and encouragement from Tasha, Maya finally hit send. The op-ed found its way to a prominent literary magazine, and she held her breath, waiting for the response. When it published, the reaction was overwhelming. Her words resonated with many, sparking discussions across social media platforms and igniting a collective call for change within the literary world. Maya felt a surge of hope as the comments poured in, expressing solidarity and support. Readers shared their own experiences with racism in literature, echoing her sentiments and amplifying the message. It was a moment of triumph, a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of speaking out. Yet, amidst the celebration, Maya knew that the battle was far from over. Ethan's disdain still loomed in the shadows, and she braced herself for the inevitable confrontation that awaited her. But this time, she felt equipped to face it head-on. With Tasha by her side and a community rallying behind her, Maya was ready to continue her fight, empowered by the strength of her words and the unwavering support of those who believed in her mission. As the lights dimmed in the studio, Maya Johnson felt a rush of nerves and excitement coursing through her veins. The set of Literary Voices, a prominent talk show, was both intimidating and exhilarating. She had been invited to discuss her best-selling book, Shadows of Silence, and the critical issues it raised about racism and resilience. The audience was buzzing, a mixture of anticipation and curiosity palpable in the air. As she took her seat across from the host, she caught sight of Ethan Blake, the owner of Blake's Books, who had been seated unceremoniously beside her. His smug expression did little to quell the anger bubbling inside her. "Welcome, Maya. It's great to have you here," the host, a charismatic woman named Jenna, said, flashing a bright smile. "And Ethan, let's not forget you. Your bookstore has come under scrutiny lately. Let's dive into this conversation." Maya felt a knot in her stomach. She had prepared for this moment, but now, facing Ethan, she felt her heart race. Jenna turned to her. "Maya, your book has sparked significant discussions across the country. Can you tell us what inspired you to write it?" Taking a deep breath, Maya leaned forward, her voice steady. "I wanted to shed light on the often silenced conversations about racism, the pain, the struggle, and the resilience of those who endure it every day. It's not just a story, it's a reflection of reality for many." Ethan interjected, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "But isn't it a little niche? I mean, how many people really want to read about such heavy topics? It seems like you're trying to capitalize on current trends." Maya's jaw clenched at his dismissive tone. "It's not a trend, Ethan. It's a necessity. Ignoring these issues only perpetuates the cycle of silence and suffering. People want to connect, to understand, and to heal." The tension in the studio thickened, and Jenna sensed it. She quickly shifted the conversation. "Ethan, you've had some backlash from the community regarding your refusal to stock Maya's book. How do you respond to that?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably, the confident facade starting to crack. "I stand by my decisions. Not every book is suitable for every audience. My store caters to specific tastes," and before he could finish, Maya interrupted, her voice imbued with passion. "It's easy to dismiss what you don't understand, isn't it? You've created an environment where diverse voices are silenced, and you've proudly proclaimed that you won't support them. It's harmful, Ethan." The audience shifted, murmurs spreading through the crowd. Jenna looked at Ethan, eyebrows raised. "What do you say to that?" Ethan's expression darkened. "I have the right to choose what I sell in my store. I'm not going to be bullied into carrying books just because they're trending on social media." Maya leaned back, her heart pounding, but she pressed on. "It's about more than just sales. It's about representation and acknowledging the experiences of marginalized communities. Your refusal isn't just a business decision. It's a stance against inclusion." Suddenly, a text chime sounded from Jenna's phone. She glanced at it, her eyes widening. "It appears there's breaking news regarding your bookstore, Ethan. Reports are surfacing about a history of discriminatory practices in your hiring and sales processes." Ethan's face paled as Jenna continued. This could change everything. As social media erupted with the revelations, Maya felt a surge of vindication. The audience's whispers grew into a cacophony of discussion, and she could see Ethan struggling to maintain his composure. "This is a smear campaign," he shouted defensively. "No, Ethan," Maya replied calmly, her conviction unwavering. "This is accountability. It's time for you to face the consequences of your actions." The show wrapped up amidst a storm of controversy, cameras flashing as Maya stepped off the set, her heart racing. The backlash was swift and severe for Ethan, who faced calls for boycotts and protests outside his store. As she exited, Maya was greeted by adoring fans and fellow authors eager to support her. In the days that followed, offers for speaking engagements poured in, and a major publishing house approached her about her next book. The contrast between her rising star and Ethan's fading reputation was stark. As Blake's Books closed its doors for good, Maya felt a wave of liberation wash over her. Standing in her living room, surrounded by friends and supporters, she raised a glass. To resilience, to voices that deserve to be heard, and to the power of stories that unite us. Cheers erupted, and Maya knew that her journey was far from over. She was ready to embrace her role as an advocate for change, empowered by the struggle she had faced and the triumphs that lay ahead.